to the Secrets of College Planning. I'm your host, Anthony Uva, and today we're going to get some insight in what colleges do for ice hockey. My guest today is Harry Rosenholtz, and he is an independent education consultant, and welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah, no problem. So Harry, I usually start my guests where they went to college, so where did you go?
I went to Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio. Not exactly a bastion of ice hockey.
Okay, no problem. Well, so after you graduated from college, how does someone get into coaching?
Well, I was always passionate about the game. I love the game, and when I had my kids, I started coaching them in as a volunteer in boys hockey. And
Okay.
it turns out that I coached them for 14 years. Something like that, and it became something that really drove me and motivated me for the rest of my life.
So before the show, you were saying that you coached at Yale and Quinnipiac. So how many years did you do that?
I started in 1999 as a volunteer assistant at Yale, and I coached there for 9 years. I became the associate head coach in my second year there. And then I became the associate head coach of Quinnipiac in 2008.
Okay.
And I stayed there until 2011.
Wow, that's fantastic. So ice hockey. How does a student in high school or before high school, how do they get started in looking into playing ice hockey?
Well, playing ice hockey is not that difficult. There should, in certain areas.
Okay.
There should be lots of rinks. There's lots of people who want to teach. There's lots of coaches. There's lots of teams, club teams, house league teams, things like that. That part of it is really not too difficult.
Okay.
I think.
And so as for kids going into ice hockey, where do they start? What's the process that a student would start?
Well, what I would like to see them do is really work on their skill set and constantly work on their skill set, especially when they're younger. Now, there's age-appropriate development, things for stick handling, ages that are better for stick handling, ages that are better for other kinds of physical development. And as long as they're with coaches that understand that, they'll get a better benefit from it.
Now, what's the age that usually these students start at?
Today, kids are starting at 3, 4, 5 years old as far as beginning to play hockey, learn to skate, things like that.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's real early.
It's very early. It's a very all-consuming sport.
Yeah, I bet. So does these students, do they start where they're starting in middle school to really start to
Get serious
about it?
No, they're starting before middle school.
Really?
Unfortunately, yeah. Things are today. There's a bunch of club teams throughout North America and Europe, and kids are recruited to play on some of these teams early on if they're talented. Other kids become more talented as they work more consistently, and there's lots of these groups that are starting even before middle school.
Wow.
Yeah,
So how
the under 10 age, there's a whole group of teams that are considered the under 10 age, and that's really where the bulk of the players are in USA Hockey and Hockey Canada.
Really?
Yeah.
So how do these parents find these groups?
Well, I think anybody who goes to a rink starts to get and is interested in hockey starts to find out and to funnel themselves into the areas that they want most. Okay. So if their kids are really young, they could start to work on skill development. Eventually, they might want to get into a travel team kind of program. Again, it's very all-consuming. It's something that will occupy most of the parents and their kids' lives.
Yeah. So now, you're saying a lot of these kids starting at 10 years old and even before.
Yep.
How about the kids that start at 13, 14, 15 years old when they're just going into high school? Is there anything that those kids can do?
Yeah, actually, believe it or not, if they're good athletes and they start later, a lot of the trend has shown that those kids become more successful university players down the road because they're starting later, they're a little bit more mature, they're a little bit more committed to the sport. They're behind other kids when they first start. and somehow that motivates these kids to actually exceed the abilities of some of the kids who started earlier.
Okay, so now, what's the recruiting process at the college level? What do they go through to find these kids?
Okay, well, it's changed so dramatically in the last 5 or 6 years. So when I first started recruiting at Yale University, none of the girls ever made a commitment to a college until April of their 12th grade year, pretty much. That didn't matter if they were just beginning, medium level players or even the really super elite players. Nobody really made a commitment until April of their 12th grade year. That has changed dramatically in the last 5 years. Today, there are kids making college commitments in 9th grade. There's kids making college commitments in 10th grade. And literally, the whole scenario has changed. About 50% of the college scholarship money that's offered is offered by the end of the first semester of a kid's 10th grade year.
Wow.
So it's out of control.
And how many schools are out there for ice hockey? Is there quite a number, or is it a small number?
Well, on the girls' side, which is where I coached, there's roughly 35 Division I schools and 55 or 56 Division III schools. Okay. That's expanding. There's some more Division III schools that are being added next year on the girls' side. On the boys' side, there's something like 59 Division I schools and the same kind of number for Division III.
Wow.
Yeah.
So now, what is the process that these college coaches are taking? How are they finding these kids?
Yeah, well, again, they're combing the fields earlier and earlier. So it used to be we'd never go see a kid in an under 14 age bracket. I was just at the U.S. Nationals for girls in Green Bay, and the games that were most heavily attended by the college coaches were the under 14 age and the under 16 age. Oh. So the whole shift of what they're focusing on and when they're focusing on these players has really changed.
And how many kids do they look at an Ivy League or a Division I type school? How many kids are they looking at, and how many kids do they actually fill into the college level rankings?
Well, a lot of it depends on where they are in the pecking order. So a weaker team will typically throw out a wider net. All right, so they're looking at maybe literally 50 or 60 kids in their top group that they hope to attract to that school. Okay. Maybe a total of 200 kids overall that they're surveying and keeping track of as much as they can. Mm-hmm. The more elite teams don't have to do much of that at all, so that they're focusing on the 5 or 6 kids that they want and that they hope to bring in. Typically, a roster in college is 25, 27 kids, typically in Division I. Mm-hmm. So they bring in maybe 5 to 6 kids a year on the average. And
is there money or scholarships, or how does it all work at Division I compared to a Division III school?
Right. Okay. In Division I, there are scholarships except for the Ivies and a few other schools sprinkled in who have been grandfathered in, who don't offer scholarship money, but they do offer financial aid based on the students' families' demonstrated need and their academic merit.
And at a Division III school?
It's all financial aid and or academic merit money.
Okay, so parents can go look for that stuff at a Division III type school, or they have to ask the coach, or how does it work?
Absolutely, and today Division I schools are not always offering full scholarships. They have 18 scholarships to play with, and the coaches can basically divvy that up any way they choose. Wow. So today it's not uncommon for kids to be offered a 3/4 ride, 3 for 4 years, or even a half ride or less. So sometimes the financial aid and academic route is actually more favorable.
Now, some of the things that a kid has to do is a little bit different than other sports. Is there any showcases or things like that kids have to do to go on to college and play ice hockey?
Yeah, there are specific college hockey showcases. In fact, I run a company called collegehockeysshowcases.com that kids can go to and show their wares. Some of them are sort of mega showcases where there's lots and lots of participants and a certain number of coaches that are involved. And then there's ones like mine, which are smaller showcases, so we don't have as many participants, but we have the same number of coaches. So one of the things that I think kids should be looking for in general is the ratio between the coaches and the number of players.
Okay.
Because obviously the more exposure they get, the more attention they get, the better off they're going to be.
And what is the ratio that they should be looking at?
Well, some showcases have 90 or so participants, kids, and maybe 25 to 30 coaches. I think that's a really good ratio.
Okay.
The other ones have 170, about 10 teams, and 30 or 35 coaches, and I think that's a great ratio. So really 3 to 1 I think is a really good ratio to have. Then you have some of the bigger showcases that have 500, 600 participants and the same number of coaches. So I think the opportunity to really demonstrate what you can do is lowered in that situation.
So they should look at more of the smaller type of showcases if they could.
I'm tooting my own horn, but I absolutely think that's the way to go.
Okay. So you were saying that you coached girls ice hockey. So girls ice hockey, is it different than boys ice hockey?
Well, other than the fact that there's no direct intentional contact, there really is no difference. And the passion and the intensity that the girls prepare with is every bit as intense as on the boys' side.
Really?
Yeah.
And is the recruiting process the same for girls as it is for boys?
It's becoming that way. And the reason that it's becoming that way is that the colleges have tended to hire more of the former men's university assistant coaches as head coaches on the girls' side. Oh. So with that, they brought all this, the accelerated pace of recruiting and things like that. In fact, in some respects now, on the girls' side, it's even more intense than it is on the guys' side. And that's simply because the pool of really eligible university athletes is smaller on the girls' side than it is on the guys' side.
So where are the pockets in the United States that women's ice hockey is? Is there pockets?
Yeah, there are pockets.
Okay.
So Michigan is a great place. Minnesota has probably more players than any area by far. Massachusetts, Connecticut are all strong places. Ohio has some good hockey. But California has some interesting players. They all grow up playing roller hockey, so their stick handling is typically more advanced than some of the kids on the East Coast.
Yeah.
So there are some pockets like that.
Interesting. So a lot of these coaches, are they flying around the country looking for these kids, or is it where you have a lot of recruiting services or things like that?
It's very competitive. Coaches are responsible for their own recruiting, so they do fly all over the place. They fly internationally these days. I was just at the World Championships in Malmo, Sweden, and those are all older players. Most of those players had been spoken for. But I would say that there are some kids throughout the world today that are very worthwhile recruiting for Division I.
Wow.
Yeah.
So now let's go into the academic side. What do kids need academically to advance to these colleges?
Well, first of all, in general, Anthony, kids need to prepare earlier. All right? Because the recruiting cycle has advanced so dramatically, they really need to do things that they never used to have to do. For instance, I advise kids today to write an SAT or an ACT exam no later than late spring of their sophomore year, 10th grade. I think it's very important just to get a diagnostic of where they might end up, where they might be able to go, so that if they are looking to try and get into an elite school, an Ivy League school or a NESCAC school or one of those types of schools, they start to build a portfolio of their academic record and also understand what kinds of things they need to do. Now, because a lot of the schools allow super scoring today, It's also an advantage to just really get an early diagnostic so that so kids can understand if they've done really well in the verbal section and not so well, let's say, on the math section, they can just focus on that math section on their next test try.
So how early is early for these kids? Is it 8th grade, 7th grade?
To start thinking about putting
for
things together.
academically and things?
No, I think as soon as they get into 9th grade, they need to have a game plan in place.
Okay.
Literally, as much as they possibly can. And that means having a curriculum that is right and fits their
Core classes and things
well,
like that?
no, it fits their target schools.
Okay.
So for kids trying to get into Yale, let's say, obviously she needs to take as many honors classes, or he needs to take as many honors classes as they can, as early as they can, to demonstrate that kind of strength to the admissions department.
Gotcha. And at an Ivy League school like Yale, is there an advantage for kids playing sports?
That is the loaded question, and I'm going to give you the honest answer. There is no bigger hook today to getting into an elite university or elite college than through athletics. To give you an example, 1 out of every 5 kids at Yale is a varsity athlete. 1 out of every 5. It's a startling number. 1 out of every 3 kids at Williams or Amherst is a varsity athlete. Athletics is valued dramatically by admissions department, and with good reason. I can give you some examples of things of why they value those things, and even get into a little bit of a discussion about the controversy around that, if you'd like.
Sure, please do.
So, the former president of Princeton, William Bowen, wrote a book about called The Game of Life, and in that he sort of criticized the whole idea of Ivy League schools having athletics. And what they did is they took athletes and they took their incoming SAT scores and they found that those SAT scores were much lower than the regular incoming student. Okay. Which is no surprise, since in ice hockey you have to practice for 4 hours a day, not including your strength and conditioning. Sure. And things like that. So there's lots of reasons why kids might come into a school, an elite school, with a slightly lower grade point average or slightly lower SAT or ACT score. Mm-hmm. But then what he did was he took those kids and he looked at them and their performance over the 4 years in that school. And he found that those kids actually underperformed based on what they were predicted to perform. Wow. It's an unfair matrix, all right? And here's why. Those kids that are Division I athletes have to commit to about 20 hours of training every week. That's not including travel. That's not including injuries. It's not including other things that make them tired and all these other things. So what they were looking at was basically their success as they could measure it in those 4 years on a college campus. Okay. It's really basically unfair. What they should be looking at is the lifelong achievement of some of these kids. And I think that's where it really resonates. And this is why schools value it, because colleges get more alumni donations from student athletes per capita by far than they do from regular students.
Wow. That's very interesting. So that brings up a question then. A lot of parents say out there, the sport takes up a lot, and I want my son or daughter to graduate from the university. What do you say to the kids that actually come to the Ivy Leagues or a Division I school, play a sport? What's the balance that they have to do to graduate from that school?
That's a great question, Anthony. And frankly, it really depends on each kid. And it depends on what kind of experience they're looking for. So if a kid becomes a hockey player at a Division I school, it's extremely challenging. They're always fighting for ice time. They're always working out. They're always training. There's all this tremendous commitment from on their time that they could be doing other things at an elite university with. Yeah. But on the other hand, the minute they walk through that door, they have 24 or 25 other friends.
Right.
And those are kids that they will probably bond with and have as friends for the rest of their lives. So it's really a balancing act. It really depends on how much that individual kid is willing to commit to his or her athletic career. In most cases, I think kids that even kids that go to elite schools find it to be extremely rewarding.
So what would you say the breakdown is for those students? Do they study more when they're not practicing compared to students that are just going to school?
Kids that are athletes tend to have great time management. They're very competitive kids. They're naturally competitive. That's why after they graduate, they're so wanted by professional schools and graduate schools and companies, because they understand that these kids have been able to fight through adversity to become successful in life. And most of those kids are successful in life. Thankfully, I've written more than 20 successful letters of recommendation for kids who've gone on to medical school.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Congratulations.
That's a good thing.
Yeah. So with kids, with student athletes that are at the universities, what's the regimen that they're going through with ice hockey? Take me through the whole year. When they start in August, right? Are they starting in July, August? When do they start when they go in as a freshman?
Okay, let's look at it from a scholarship school standpoint. So they come in August. They spend a couple of weeks doing testing, physical testing, to see where they are, what kind of condition they are, how much they've been following the athletic department's program over the summer. So they get tested, and then they begin by doing some light captain's practices for a couple of weeks. And then, believe it or not, in September, they're going right into regular full teams practices. It's later in the Ivy Leagues, but in September, they're going into full 6-day-a-week practices.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
they
so,
begin playing in early October these days, maybe even late September in some cases.
And so so the season goes from when? October until when?
Until the end of March.
Till the end of March.
The Final Four just finished. Wait, it was in April. It just finished on April 11th.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so that takes them all the way until April. So
Yes.
they encompass the 2 semesters. The sport.
It's the longest sport. It's the longest tenured sport during, or the season sport during the year. So yes, hockey is a big time commitment.
Do they get a break during the Christmas holiday, or is it?
They get a short break during the Christmas holiday. They might get 5 or 6 days, and then they typically come back on either Christmas Day or the day after Christmas and begin to be prepared for games in early January or even late December.
Okay, so now that takes us all the way until April. What happens between April and then August when they start up again?
Yeah,
Is there something
I think.
that goes on?
Absolutely. Most coaches usually give kids a couple of weeks off, and then they begin their dry land or off-season training program. And that can be a time when kids really get the most gain, so they can really work on their strength.
Yeah.
And it's a successful time. A lot of coaches have them doing running, other kinds of training in order to prepare them for their summer program. And every school gives them a summer program, a summer workout program that they expect them to do.
Really?
Absolutely.
So throughout the 4-year program, these kids are pretty much getting all physically fit. So by the time they're seniors and graduating, what would you say is a percentage of kids that go to the NHL or women's Olympic ice hockey teams or anything like that? Is there a huge percentage?
No, it's a small percentage. It's an extremely small percentage. But one thing that's interesting is that teams that on the men's side that retain their older players, Quinnipiac, Yale a few years ago, Union last year, teams that are able to retain those older players have made runs at the national championship because those kids, in fact, are stronger, they're more athletic, and they're more prepared.
So is it similar to basketball kids in college where they're one and done and then they go to the NHL, the top kids?
It can be. There's a kid that's playing for Boston University named Eichel who just won the Hobey Baker as a freshman, which it's only been done one other time, I believe.
Wow.
And all the expectations is that he'll just jump to the NHL next year.
Wow. And then on the women's side, what happens on the women's side?
On the women's side, the national team becomes an important end game. For the women, the Olympics are the NHL, right? So they really work towards making that national team program, either Canada, their U.S., European teams. They try to get on that senior national team. And that's a process. There's camps that happen during the summer, tryouts during the summer, evaluation camps. They're being evaluated during their regular season games. They're being evaluated all the time.
Wow.
And then they are invited to a senior camp, a senior tryout every year.
Well, we're coming to the end of our show, and usually I end with my guests. What advice do you want to give to the parents out there that their sons or daughter want to go to college to play ice hockey? So what advice do you want to give them?
Have them become as good as they can become before they're exposed. So you want them to work on their skill set, on their speed, on their power, their shooting, all the important skill set as much as you possibly can before getting exposed. To me, that's number one. Obviously, if you're a good player, you have a better chance of getting recruited. Number two, I used to get 150 emails a week at Yale and Quinnipiac, all right? And obviously, that's a lot of emails.
Sure.
So, two little bits of advice. One bit is make your email stick out. Say something in your email that's really going to resonate with that coach. Do some homework about the school and about the coach that will specifically address the connection that you and he or she might have. I think that's a very, very helpful thing. The other thing is pick up the phone. All right. In my 9 years at Yale, I had a grand total of 6 phone calls. All right, and I recruited 4 of those girls.
Wow.
All right, and the reason for that was that they showed tremendous confidence. They showed, an ability to communicate with me, and we were able to make an immediate connection. So it's all about creating a dialogue and making a connection.
Great. Well, thank you very much for coming to the show.
Thanks
I
for
appreciate
having
it.
me.
Yeah,
Great.
no problem. So you've been watching The Secrets of College Planning. I'm your host, Anthony Uva. Until next time.